We have here Pierpaolo Antonello from Cambridge University, who has kindly agreed to talk to us about Professor René Girard and his interaction with Professor Girard at Stanford University, and how he came to meet Professor Girard and what kind of impact Professor Girard had on Pierpaolo. Pierpaolo, let me start off by asking you, you met Professor Girard in 1995, which is when he retired, correct?
Yes, let's say that I was at Stanford, right at Stanford in 1994 as a visiting graduate student. And somehow it was interesting because at that moment, I didn't know much about Girard. I was introduced to his books by a friend of mine who was studying philosophy at the University of Venice. And she gave me a copy of Mensonge Romantique, the city design of the novel, and of Violence is Sacred. I read it very quickly and in a very superficial way, and I didn't understand much at that point. When I came to Stanford, my research project, revolved around the relationship between literature and science in 20th century Italy. And I was, of course, interested in, general epistemological questions. And I was particularly fascinated by Michel Serres' books. So my initial idea when I applied to Stanford was to work with Serres alongside, the people in the Italian department like Jeffrey Schnapp or Robert Harrison, or people that you know and remember. But then it was, and then I attended to one of René Girard classes. It was basically a class on the novel, the European novel for undergraduates. And again, it was not really, I was not really taken by his approach. But then a colleague and a friend of mine based in Italy asked me to consider the possibility of interviewing Girard for an Italian philosophical journal. And Italy, in fact, has been one of the most receptive national contexts for Girard's work and mimetic theory in general. Basically, everything Girard wrote have been translated into Italian.
That's right.
So to prepare for this interview, I started reading René's work, starting from with Things Hidden since the foundation of the world, with the idea of fully engaged with this theory. And as you remember, I did it with my dear friend João César de Castro Rocha, who is now professor of comparative literature at State University of Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, and who was also starting his PhD at Stanford. And he was very eager to know more about Girard. So we started to read Girard, and that became basically the most exciting intellectual experience of my life, no question. So in a sense, it was a sort of a revelation. And then, I approached René, who was the most generous person. He was really open to engage with us as totally novice to mimetic theory, and with our questions, and we started a dialogue with him. I mean, so it was actually outside the classroom. I was not engaged with him in a seminar or in a let's say class setting, but in a real intellectual exchange and dialogue. And I have to thank René because he was absolutely open to us, and he was engaged, and of course, I mean, that was my first year at Stanford. I didn't expect to be engaged in a dialogue of that magnitude and scope when I started my PhD. And of course, that was, again, as I said, basically the most exciting intellectual experience that I had ever since. So this interview was published, as I said, in this Italian journal. Was let's say, a 50-page interview. And we met daily for a couple of hours for a week. Then that interview, so then we discussed it with René. It was open to expand this dialogue, this interview, and make it as a book. And that book became, what is now Evolution Conversion.
I have it here. I believe, in my humble opinion, it's probably one of the best books on Girard and his theory and his life. I enjoyed reading it a lot, and I think
Thank you very much.
Fantastic. It's probably one of the best books out there.
I mean, you were also were part of the conversation, because after that we discussed, René's theory with Jean-Pierre Dupuy, with you, in a more academic seminar format, and of course René was always present. Even though he retired at that point, he was always available and present, and happy to dialogue with us. And you remember very well. I mean,
sure, absolutely.
And the other thing, the thing is good humor. In a sense, it was always a pleasure to spend time with him, because there was always a sort of funny side. It was not, sort of a stiff, serious academic mind, but it was really a very human, warm character.
Right. So, what was your first? Do you remember your first encounter with him?
So the first encounter, as I said, probably the first time I saw him, it was when he biked to. He was biking on campus, basically.
Right.
And a friend of mine pointed out, I mean, that is René Girard, a famous French thinker. Okay. And okay, but then the first time I saw him was as I told you, at this undergraduate class on the European novel.
Right. Do you remember what year it was? What was the year?
I think it was 1994.
94.
Yeah.
94.
At that time I was just visiting. I was auditing, so I was not taking that class for credit. I was just let's say, as they say in the US, shopping around. I was basically trying to find my way through this new system and this new environment, academic environment. That was my first time in the US. So, but then yes, the year after I started reading René more systematic, as I said.
So let me ask you, your background is literature, correct?
It's something between philosophy and literature, yes.
So how in the world did you get into anthropology? Because your book is really dealing with Girard's anthropology quite a bit.
Well, in a sense, it's inevitable when you encounter René's theory, Girard's theory, to expand your, let's say, disciplinary horizons. So there's no way you can just limit yourself to literary theory or philosophy, in a sense. You must engage with the broader questions which are tied to, let's say, anthropology, theology, paleontology, if you want. I mean, everything is there. So somehow, recently there have been some work done by archaeologists on these Turkish sites, which seems to resonate. The finding there seems to resonate with René's theory. So somehow, as I said, in a way, it was a kind of a naive. It was a bit naive, as you are as a young scholar, in a way, to step outside the perimeter of your field. So, but somehow is also a liberating experience from an intellectual standpoint. Right. And so the thing that we did, it was to work hard and read as much anthropology as we could at that point. Right. and engage with the questions. The other thing is, of course, René is not an anthropologist per se.
Right.
He has been used anthropological works to shape his theory. So somehow that's why there's some skepticism among anthropologists about this theory, because he never did any field works. He never complies with the strictures of this specific and the vocabulary of this specific academic discipline. So somehow is also an outlier in respect to any of the fields he's interested in.
Sure. How long did it take to finish the book?
And the book has a very bizarre history, because, as I said, he was born, so basically the first nucleus was this interview for an Italian journal. Then it became a book and it came out in Portuguese first for a Brazilian publisher, thanks to Joao's connections in Brazil. So it became a book. I mean, as I said, we discussed for many afternoons with René, and we shaped the book. He revised the book, and we published in Brazil first. Then we had an Italian edition, but then we basically added a few extra material for the English edition. In the meantime, the first version, so the first edition, the Portuguese, was published in 2000, and then we had 9/11.
Right.
So somehow we felt compelled to add something on that in the last chapter, and also because there were, in a sense, more critical work done.
In your interaction with René, did you feel there were parts of his theory or his personal life that he felt, or you felt rather, that he didn't want to talk about or didn't want to touch upon?
I mean, there is the first chapter of the book is a long biographical part, and actually that is a very reduced version of what he told us. I mean, and it was full of very funny anecdotes about his childhood, about his time, also less fun period during when he was in Paris during the Nazi occupation, during World War II. So I don't think he was caged or he was reluctant to speak about anything particular. My feeling is he was not really eager to discuss contemporary issues, to use his theory for, let's say, political analysis of modern times. That was the only bit that I think we resisted a bit. From academic and intellectual standpoint, he was more interested in reading the Bible. I mean, engaging with the biblical text. So because he was writing, I see Saturn falling like lightning.
Like lightning, right?
Yeah, that was the period in which he was writing that book. So
how long did you continue? When did you stop interviewing him for the book?
We started in 1995, and we had the first version of the book out in 2000. Yeah, but then, as I said, we went back to the manuscript, and in 2004, 2005, and then then there was the French version, and then the English version coming out. So the French was 2004, and the English version edition was 2007.
Right. Yeah.
So it's over a decade.
Right. So during all this time you had with him, did he ever give you any personal advice?
Not really. I mean, in a sense.
So you never became friends on a personal level. It was always very professional.
So it was professional, but we were sharing, information about, yes, we were exchanging
Right.
ideas, and I was telling him what was my plan was. He wrote me a letter of recommendation for my job here in Cambridge, but you know, it was a light touch. He never tried to give me any advice to what to do, how to lead my life. I mean, it's somehow that was his style, I think.
I also noticed in your book you had a lot of references to Italian scholars.
I brought my knowledge, I mean, let's say also my expertise, the fact that, as I said, in Italy, René Girard is a key thinker. So in a sense, more than the United States, Girard is very well known, is published by major publishers, and is studied. There are now there are centers for the study of his work in Padova, in Messina. So somehow so it was natural to me to engage also with this the secondary literature, so the work that's done on his theory in Italy.
Did you meet Giuseppe Fornari at all in person?
Yeah, actually, it's interesting because me and Giuseppe come from the same region in Italy. We are both from the Veneto.
Okay.
Yes, but I mean, the first time we met was at René Girard's house. So I met Giuseppe with René. One summer I was there, probably, I think it was in 1998 or 99, I think. And we started editing a book series on mimetic theory for a small Italian publisher.
Are you planning on doing any more work on Girard?
Yes, I have. I'm doing few things, bit and pieces on, and I think I might at some point I will try to put everything together into a monograph, into a book.
When you were discussing his theory with him, what part of his theory do you think he was the most excited about, that he loved the most? The literature, the anthropology, the biblical study, what part?
Well, as I said, at that moment, it was really very much focused on his biblical. I mean, his engagement with the scriptures.
Right.
And so that is clear. But he was ready to engage. In a sense, with that book, we tried to give a sort of very broad perspective, engage him with the different aspects of this theory. So the first chapter is biographical, but second is about the mechanism, the mimetic mechanism itself, and its relation with the evolutionary theory. I mean, Darwin so became a sort of a thread union of different chapters. We use a sentence taken from Darwin as an exergo for each chapter. We had a methodological chapter and a chapter on criticism of his theory, then one on Christianity, and the last chapter is about as I said, the modernity and postmodernity, as we call it at that time. And as I said, besides the last chapter, I think he was really happy to engage with any aspects of this theory. But as I said, at that point, he was more keen to discuss.
When you were interviewing him, he hadn't, I guess, with things hidden since the foundation of the world, was still quite a way till his last book, Ashevek Clausewitz. But he probably had the apocalyptic perspective on the world, So I want to know, at that point, did he have any solution to this apocalyptic?
I don't think you
that we're going.
Okay. I think battling to, I mean, Ashevek Clausewitz was a long way. I mean, there were considerations about a sort of apocalyptic perspective in his theory at that point. There was, in a way, a sort of a, it was not really, they were not really formalized as he did later with Archevêque Clausewitz. But somehow I was myself, I have to say that I was reluctant to engage with that aspect of it, because I don't know, maybe my young age, this apocalyptic view of modernity was something that I think I resisted. So I didn't.
Were you scared?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I was not really. I could understand, but I had a more positive view of the
world,
the evolution of modernity and postmodernity in that sense. And he was right, I was wrong, so to speak, because somehow he was really more cautious. I don't think he had a solution. Of course, you cannot really have a solution. The solution is a sort of a what he says at the end, a sort of a word fully converted, because that's the only way to prevent it. This solution lacks a bit of historical detail, so to speak, but somehow we live in this uncertainty that is given to us by Christianity, so to speak, by the openness of let's say, the Christian framework that somehow we live in, because we are free. We also are free to destroy ourselves. We are free to, in a way, to enslave the world, the material world, the earth, to our desires, needs, impulse, our freedom. So somehow this might, and we probably are paying the consequences of that in this particular moment. And the other thing is that I was not, that he told me back then that I didn't understand, is this link between, that he finds in the Bible, between the emergence of undifferentiation and the mimetic crisis, and description of the natural world collapsing. So somehow in the Bible, you can find this link between a society that is, in a way, collapsing because of mimetic impulses. I mean, the undifferentiation moment is ramping up, with descriptions of with the natural world losing its balance. And that is something that he was thinking about at the end of his life. He wanted to write something on this link. And I thought it was, there is a prophetic, of course, there is a prophetic moment, a prophetic dimensions in his thinking. And that was another element that I didn't pick up, and I regret it, because, that was quite, as I said, a prophetic insight. Right.
But you guys covered quite a bit. The book was very strong, and so the prophetic side, I'm sure other people have covered and are covering still.
Yeah.
So Pier Paolo, let me ask you. You touched upon the fact he was always riding on a bike, and he was very generous and everything. But let me ask you, can you remember one good memory that you have of René?
Well, I have many good memories of René. I have, as I said, his house on Frenchman's Road was a kind of a oasis of peace and intellectual stimulation, and very engaged and humorous chatting. So somehow I have this memory of him sitting at his chair, and and having a glass of wine with him, or a coffee, and so that's the moment that I cherish the most about my my 5 years at Stanford.
Right.
So that, as I said, that will remain impressed in my memory. And then, when I invited him to Italy, we had a fantastic time. And also with Marta, I stayed with them in his apartment in Paris. All these moments were really important to me, and are still important and part of my the affection that I have for him and for that time that I had the privilege. I was lucky. I have the privilege to meet him at that moment of my life, and
Right.
it was random. I mean, I didn't expect that.
Would you say he had an impact on you spiritually?
The thing is, somehow there is a way, there is always a personal dimension involved in the understanding of mimetic theory. It touches you personally at all levels, at a personal level, at the way in which you understand reality, you understand history, you understand how you engage with people, a sense of community. So somehow it gives you a lens through which you, in order to fully grasp mimetic theory, you need to have a sort of personal dimension in itself. I mean, there is an existential moment which is part of the full grasping of the theory.
Right.
So, and that's why many intellectuals actually approaches Girard tend to, let's say, try to put the Christian or the biblical part aside, concentrate on anthropological work or work on literary theory. But I think it's when you engage with Girard's theory, you need to put yourself into it.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Pier Paolo. It was wonderful talking to you.
My pleasure. Babak. It was very good to see you after how many years? 25?
Yes, 25 years. It's been 25 years. So
yeah, like a quarter of a century.